I'm a psychotherapist. Um, I was born in Russia, but my family's from Belarus. Um, I've been interested in studying Eastern philosophy most of my life, and I've been taking psychedelics for most of my life too. So I'm here to share my knowledge about navigating altered states using Eastern philosophy. Um, the title is the Tao of Psychedelics, but it's almost like redundant because they're synonymous. So you could say the psychedelics of psychedelics or the Tao of Tao. All right. So just a little bit about my work. I own and clinically direct spiral process therapy. We're a process-oriented clinic, and then we also offer ketamine assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic integration, and we also run trainings for therapists and healing practitioners in this sort of Eastern process-oriented approach to healing. Um, so let's get started. So what I'm going to be telling you is simultaneously uplifting. You may get high from this information. Just a fair warning. Also, it's a little bit unsettling at times too. So, so that's basically the introduction. I think the benefit of these Eastern thoughts is that concept itself is a bit limiting. That's the problem with concept. So let me just go on here. Before I actually go into that, let me just, I don't know if some of you study Taoism or anything, but I'm just going to break down the terms so that you kind of understand what it's about. So in Taoism, there's two main books. There's the Tao Te Ching and then the I Ching. Just so you know, if you ever want to look into it, those are the two kind of Bibles. And so Tao literally means the way, um, and it's interpreted in different ways. And Tao Te means the way of activity, or it's almost the immediacy or the formality of how things occur. That's all it is, how things unfold or how things occur. And so, and I means how change occurs, and Qing means like the pattern of the way it occurs, or the texture of the way that things occur. Okay, and so if you put that together, I Ching means the process as perceived in terms of changes occurring in a given pattern. So that's the whole idea. It's what patterns or how do things occur or unfold? Does that make sense so far? Okay. And so why that's important is that a lot of times what we experience is not what we experience as it is, but more as how we project our perceptual filters onto things, and those are the concepts. Okay. So concept itself is limiting. So I'll give you an example. If I was to play a song for you right now, and I didn't tell you anything about the song, and I just put it on for you, you would have a certain type of experience. But if I before I put on the song on, I told you the genre. If I say, oh, this is going to be a grunge song from the 1990s or something like that, that would already color your perception, and so you'd be listening to that song through some kind of stereotyped attitude or idea. And so in a way, any label you put on something, it frames it in a certain way, which limits your true experience. So you don't listen to it, you're actually like projecting a schema onto it. And so this is a really beautiful quote. At some of these seemingly unbeknownst artists actually had it already in their mind. So the quote is, this is by Claude Monet, obviously the painter. It says, "To see, we must forget the name of the thing we are looking at." Okay. Um, so, because names are just ideas, concepts, they're not real. They're not the way things are occurring, right? And some of you, I'll give you an example. Some of you may have had this experience, like personally me, being really high on mushrooms, for example. I would be listening to my favorite song, and I wouldn't know what song it was. I'm like, what song is this? It's so beautiful. Because there's a certain kind of perceptual filter of both recollecting the memory of it and then the anticipation of it, the future. And when that's stripped away, that's true listening. You can actually experience the beauty of the experience without concept. Concept is actually within itself a narrowing of consciousness. It doesn't expand consciousness. It narrows it because it frames things in a very stereotypical way. So in a way, what I'm inviting you to do is to go beyond concept. Concept is not very useful, particularly with psychedelics, with going into an altered state, because you're basically boxing yourself in or framing yourself in a very limited sense. So we have to move beyond concept. Okay. So you have certain things. Obviously, you may have heard this from postcards or whatever, but it's the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, because it's nameless. Okay. And this transcending of concept is actually pretty. It's not limited to Taoism or Zen for that matter, but it's also can be found in Christian mysticism. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Saint Dionysius or Meister Eckhart. They echo the same type of ideas. So this is where the idea of mystical unknowing comes from, or translucent darkness. So it's this idea that, so like for example, any word that you can come up with, like even unity, you know, it's fancy terms people use like oneness or unity, that is still just a word that tries to encapsulate an experience. And so then you're trying to hold on to an idea. Oh yeah, unity, that's the thing, right? But that's still just a concept, okay? And that becomes limiting. So anything that you can hold on to as a concept becomes a cliche. And that can be a little bit unsettling because you're like, oh, I can't hold on to anything. But that is the only true reality, which is this nameless, ineffable experience, direct experience outside of concept. That can get a person pretty high, I think. In a way, concepts are a safety valve for the unsettling intensity of the present moment. It's so raw, and so we want concepts. I don't know. I'm this person. I'm an introvert. I'm a title or whatever you want to come up with, or name any experience. By the way, how am I doing? What time do I have to end by? Just so I know. 7:40. Okay. Okay. Good. So okay, moving right along. So keep in mind that this kind of thing can be very unsettling, particularly with going into the psychedelic experience, and also just allowing yourself to go beyond concept, beyond thought, beyond mind, and even beyond your own individuality. So you need support. Like, this is something that is usually, that's why like therapists are important and things like that. Community. We'll move on. All right, so actually I'm going to read this to you because this is a really cool thing this is Saint Dionysius. This is a 1st century Christian mystic. And this is talking about God. But this is where I think some of this language comes from. It's super early. So this is talking about God, by the way. But thus far he had not yet conversed with God himself, nor beheld him, for he is without aspect, but saw only places where he dwells. This I take to mean that the most heavenly and lofty of things, which may be seen and known, are no more than certain images of things subordinate to him, who transcends all. Through them is shown in his presence, exceeding all comprehension, standing on those heights of his holy places which may be known of the mind. And at times he who is set free of things seen and things seeing enters into the truly mystical darkness of unknowing, wherefrom he puts out all intellectual knowledge and cleaves to that which is quite beyond touch and sight, the entire essence of him who is beyond all. Thus, through the voiding of all knowledge, he is joined with the better part of himself, not with any creature, nor with himself, nor with another, but with him who is inwardly unknowable, and in knowing nothing, he knows beyond the mind. So this is first century writings. Pretty cool, right? So this is the Christian version of the Tao, or Zen, whatever. Cool. Okay. And so, and then, once you start going into this sort of conceptless space, there is this moralism that gets in the way sometimes. Good, bad. So I think I think this is where people get tripped up with psychedelics, is that they start to maybe label certain experiences. Like, for instance, if you're feeling sad or something, or you're feeling some kind of pity or shame, you're likely to assert that, oh, this is a bad feeling. Make sense? And so, but that's a trap, because that's another concept, right? So what we want to do is we want to practice non-resistance and non-duality towards any experience, any aspect of the unfolding experience, without putting a label. And particularly moralism is a type of thing where you kind of assert, something good, bad, positive, negative. Okay. And in a way, we're sort of colonized by the medical society, because we're taught to defer out. So, like, for instance, if you're feeling depressed, you're likely to go on to WebMD and find out what they say. Find out what somebody else has to say about, oh, I must be depressed. Instead of having a direct experience of your inside and then honoring what that is, or the texture of what that is. And so a lot of times with a psychedelic experience, one way to get snagged or trapped is to give into moralism, positive and negative. Okay? So that's that. By the way, I'm open for questions. It doesn't have to be till the end. If somebody has a question along the way, I can answer. Okay, and so it's if you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to rely on any concept or idea or moralism to figure out what to do or how to experience myself or how to even understand myself, there's not much to rely on. And for that reason, we need to rely on the body, because the body is the only true experience that we have, the field of matter within you. And that means that you have to become more familiar with the senses and what's happening within you. And so there's a kind of embracing of the allowance and flow in your body. And in Buddhism, they have, I don't know if some of you practice Buddhism meditation, but they have this whole idea of no craving, no aversion. And so if you're experiencing something, the two polarities are, you can have an aversion to the experience, or you can crave something that's not there. So you can not like something about yourself, or you can wish you were something else, or wish you had something else. So these are kind of these two traps of judgment. And so in Zen and Buddhism, what they say is that there is no such thing as like, for instance, let's say stealing. You can say, oh, stealing is bad. But from the Zen perspective, it's not so much that stealing is bad. It's just that if you steal, you probably that will be inconsistent with joy in your body. So you can go ahead and do it, but if you are if you connect with yourself, it'll be inconsistent with joy. So in a lot of ways, that's the measure for whether you should be doing anything whatsoever. It's not because you're told by society or some kind of litigious, oh, you shouldn't do this, something is illegal. Because those things change throughout time. At one time, maybe certain things were illegal. Marijuana was illegal. Now it's legal. You have all sorts of like, slavery and oppression and certain things that were illegal. And so if you try to defer out to society, you're always going to be in a way duped because you're just being told what to do. Instead, the idea is you want to check within yourself whether whatever you're doing is that consistent with joy. And your body will tell you that. Yeah.
Can you expand then on how the two principles intersect? We might say that joy is a desirable experience. And so then when I'm not in joy, am I then desiring that which is not here? Or is the joy itself the presence that you're pursuing in this practice of craving and aversion?
I would say joy is more of a measure of whether or not you're in like an optimal flow state. That which you can measure against. But of course, you can also crave joy too. That's a good point. Yeah. And that's the thing is, well, at least the Buddhists, according to Buddhism or the Buddhist people, they believe that that's impossible unless you have some kind of sociopath, unless it's an organic thing that it's impossible to lie, steal, kill, and all the whatever those moral principles. It's impossible to experience joy. It's the antithesis. You can't have one or the other. Yeah.
Do you mean then, like as a in maybe an adult or mature person, because a child, hasn't fully matured as an individual, or they find enjoyment.
Yeah, you get your training wheels, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't have, it's an outside concept of, the consequences of that.
Yeah. I mean, this is generally speaking.
Yeah,
I guess that the whole idea is that, like, you don't want to rely on like somebody else's idea. It's like, oh, you should have integrity, or you should have this, or you should like. But these are all just like societal ideas that you're just deferring out external. You're deferring out to somebody else's way of being instead of it being on your own terms. That's the idea, and your body is what's providing that. And so most things that are wholesome, you should experience them directly. Yeah. And then if some of you have ever heard vipassana, vipassana means that word means inquiry. And then there's a specific type of vipassana called Vedana, which means body oriented. So Vipassana Vedana is when you do the body scanning. I highly recommend doing body scanning. It's a very awesome way to get out of your body and to examine the field of matter within you and to become more interested and inquisitive about what you're experiencing directly outside of concept. Okay. I made this chart. This is actually this is a canned version of what I teach, like a 35-hour long workshop, and this is like a compressed version. So there's, but I teach this stuff as a therapy, how to practice this experiential means. But I gave this. This is a little chart that I teach to my students, but it's a little of a way to understand how to get to this place of being instead of thinking. So if you look over here, the most superficial, so you can see that these concentric rings are a representation of the being and the layers within you. There's profound levels within you, and there's superficial aspects. We all have them. They don't negate each other, but you do have more superficial components and then more profound levels. And so the idea is that the most superficial component within you is your thinking self, your conceptual mind, and that faculty is the least reliable faculty, meaning that you should not trust every thought you're having. A lot of your thoughts are not even your own. These are just society or your parents or whatever, right? Based on biases and things like that. So like it not both in society, but as well as immediate biases. Like if you had an experience with somebody slamming the door and you were scared, then you're more likely to get scared if somebody else slams the door. So you have a lot of biases naturally. So does that make sense so far? You're more prone to suspicion and various levels of cognitive distortion if you just think you can understand yourself by thinking your way through it. Makes sense? So if you say, okay, fine, I can't trust my thoughts, then if you want to go deeper within yourself, you can then go into the emotional realm. The emotions are obviously more profound than thoughts. Like for example, if I say I'm sad right now, that's a lot more profound than the idea of sadness. I can tell you about sadness. That's the cognitive level. Right now I am sad. I'm experiencing sadness. So that's more deep, right? That makes sense, right? So in that way, emotions are more reliable than thoughts. Okay? But here's the problem with emotions. Emotions are also dependent on thoughts because you can't have an emotion without an idea. Like for instance, if I'm sad, I need to be sad about something. So in a way, emotions don't exist in a vacuum. You have to believe something to be sad. You can't just up and feel sad. Maybe it's something that's sub-perceptive. You may not understand or you're not in touch with the idea, but there's usually an idea. You can't just be sad. Okay? So in a way, emotions are actually like there's a revolving door with thoughts. So they're actually not reliable either. I hate to break it to you. Not every emotion that you have is impeccable and something to trust or follow. They also are misleading. You can get swayed very far with all sorts of lust and anger and passion and whatever, you name it. So that's something also to discern and be aware of. And so you say, okay, fine, I can't trust my thoughts, I can't trust my emotions. This one, it's kind of blurry, but it says somatic. Soma means body. That's why you have the word psychosomatic, mind, body. And so then if you make it past the familiar emotions and you make it down into the guttural sense of your existence, your being, that becomes the most actually impeccable and most reliable faculty within you, because that is pure raw data, pure raw information about the organism environment as you're experiencing it. So just the way it is. So right now I feel slight tension in my spine or something like that. That's a real experience, nothing to do with what I can project as an idea or a thought or whatever, right? So that I know to be true. And so if you want to understand yourself, the direct felt sense of the body is the most impeccable source of information about yourself if you're seeking to understand yourself better, okay, and not be I guess you would say illusioned by your thoughts, okay? And as you can see, there's something underneath the soma. The somatic is the spirit. I've put that below here because I think that a lot of people get it wrong. They think the spirit is somewhere high above. It's the opposite. I think that the being is the closest thing to spirit. Only through your being do you connect with your spirit, not through heady ideas. As a matter of fact, it's I don't know if some of you may be prejudiced towards Osho, but because of all the stuff. But one of the things that Osho says is that you can't be in joy and have the thought of joy at the same time. Similarly, you can't be in love and thinking about love. So it's like oil and water. Either you're in love and feeling it, or you're thinking about it. You can't have one or the other. As soon as you think it, you're already not in it anymore. Make sense? And so in a way, it's like, instead of you having an experience and then you're having a nice time at the top of the mountain, and then you take a picture and post it on Facebook, you already cliched it. It's no longer, it's a facsimile. And similarly, if you tell somebody about your experience, you can't tell somebody about a mystical experience. I mean, you can try, but you're using these postcard stereotypical words. Oh, I had a feeling of oneness. And already you're like, it's a cliche. You can't, it's ineffable. You can try just for fun. You can write poetry about it. I think poetry is probably the closest thing that you can get to actually, to communicate the ineffable is through art and poetry, because otherwise you're just using cliche and stereotypical behaviors, stereotypical language that is completely watered down. I mean, we can also just sit in silence and just be with it, but we like to talk. So the spirit is the closest to the being because it is truly, because that which is truly spiritual can never be captured through comprehension and intellectual knowledge. The flow. The flow is with us. Okay. Okay, so then there's this, the other really important thing is that there's this paradoxical allowance, unequivocally, without any kind of condition. Through the psychedelic experience, you just want to allow non-resistance, okay? If you ever go to take my trainings, that's all I talk about, it's just non-resistance. So healing comes from surrender, not control. I mean, you know this. When if anybody here has ever taken psychedelics, you're not going to get very far if you're resisting, right? If you have a different experience, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me how control has ever gotten you anywhere. And so letting the fear happen. That's what you want to do. It's like if you're experiencing, you're having a psychedelic experience, or you're just at home and you're afraid, let the fear happen. Be afraid. Don't fight the fear, because then you're having fear plus resistance, which creates a lot of tension and unease and a bad trip, or whatever you want to call it. So letting go of fear. Letting the fear happen during a journey can lead to profound transformation and insight instead of resisting fear and pain. And so this is another thing I teach. I use my hands to demonstrate. So there's two types of resistance. And this is a kind of a very again, Taoist thing. So you have one type of resistance is pushing away. You could push emotions away or experiences away. So there's this type of resistance. And then if you allow the experience to come into you, then you can feel it. And then here's another point of resistance where you can hold on. So you can attach. And then that's another point of allowance, so you can let that go. That was taught by Don Hadlock, who taught me this concept. But it's very Taoist, So the idea is you don't push away, you allow in, and then you don't hold on. So that you're in a flow state, that you're not resisting anything, especially by concept. Because concepts are what's going to make you resist. Oh no, that's not good. Or I'm being too egotistical right now. An often experience in psychedelics is if you ever had an experience where you're like, oh, I'm amazing. I'm the king of the world. Oh no, don't think that. You think too highly of yourself. Whatever. And then you strangle the whole thing. Right? The idea is it doesn't matter. Unequivocally be an allowance. Just let the experience happen, just as it needs to happen, and then the flow. Right? Cool. So yeah. Okay, and then I like this image. I don't know where I found it. Maybe some of you have seen it. Maybe. So like in the first So it goes from left to right. So in the first one, this man is walking, and behind him, he's like at the shadow. He starts running away, and then the shadow gets bigger, and then it like tackles him. Okay, so that's resistance. Allowance is he's walking. He looks around, and he turns over. He hugs him, and then he becomes small. Does that make sense? So by allowing and embracing the experience, you become more powerful instead of being powerless. I hope I'm not blocking this. Makes sense? That's the whole thing in a nutshell. And if if you heard Terence McKenna or any of these people talk about the dissolving of boundaries, dissolving of boundaries, that's that same idea. Okay, let me go in a little bit further about Taoism and Zen. So, this first sentence, I'm curious if anybody knows what. So I'm going to read this to you. The highest form of a Buddha is a non-Buddha. Does anybody know why? All it takes is one person. Exactly. Because if he was wanting to be hung up on a title, then he wouldn't really be a Buddha. So the highest form of a Buddha is a non-Buddha. You can't be high and be, oh no, I am this hat, I am this whatever. So you have to transcend even titles and self-concepts because those become limiting. Right? The other cool thing is that, which may relieve some of you rascals, is that in Taoism, the holy man is often described as being mischievous. The way that they describe it, this quote says, "The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue." It's the people who, and not to put anybody down, but the proverbial people that will go out of their way to get points. Oh, I'm a good person, or I did this thing. That is actually not very noble at all. Your nobility comes from just being, just existing. And your very existence is a gift. Your natural spontaneity is a gift. And that is when you're most holy, not when you're trying to prove a point or to polish off your ego because you're the best soup kitchen guy out there. You're the best helper. Because then you're trying to build up on being noticed or being gratified, which is the opposite of being a holy man. So you need to get recognized. That's the thing. You need recognition. So it becomes an ego thing, right? So you almost have to transcend being good too. But you have to transcend trying to be a good person, because that's within itself a trap. Just be. Okay. And anybody wants to heckle me about it, I'm open to it. Yeah, or any thoughts. It doesn't have to be heckling. I'm kidding. I don't like hecklers, actually. So striving becomes a need for recognition and self-importance. As a matter of fact, so I don't think I put this here, but often, if you ever study Taoism, they have this idea of Wu Wei. Right? You've probably heard it. Wu Wei translates as non-striving. Trying to get something fixed, to get things figured out. That's within itself a kind of resistance because you're not in allowance. Okay? A little bit of some nitty-gritty of some of these Chinese. And then here, this is a good one. So this state of flow is neither overtly religious, neither non-religious. neither striving to do good, neither committing harm. So you're not going out of your way. I know I'm dressed up. This is actually a Belarusian thing that, but I'm not trying to, there's a way that we can maybe try to be too religious to try to be like, oh, I'm spiritual, which is then becomes, again, feeding into the same striving or something like that, right? So, okay. That's enough for that. So okay, let me explain. So in Chinese, there's this word ziran. This means spontaneous or natural, but it's actually better described as of itself so. And so basically it means that all of matter is self-organizing. It organizes itself. And some of you therapists out here may have heard of the term self from like an IFS perspective. But this is even more fundamental. It's not personified as the self. It means self-organizing in every cell is self-organizing. All of matter is self-organizing. And this self-organization is actually on a scaling division. So meaning, if you have looking at the galaxy itself is self-organizing, so it organizes itself. And then if you move down to the solar system organizes itself. And then going down to the planet is self-organizing. And then you have obviously, I don't know, whatever, country, state, and then you have community, like this community is self-organizing. Although you look like you seem to have free will and you're scratching your head and you're doing things, but but somehow there's a self-organizing principle that we're just all co-behaving with each other in a way. And then if you go down to the organism level, your body is self-organizing. You're digesting your food, you're doing all the things that are happening in your blood without you doing anything about it. And then even on a scaling division further down, each cell is self-organizing. Why do I say that? Is because there's a kind of reliance on the self-organizing principle of all of matter. You don't have to do anything to make anything happen. It's just all unfolding just as it needs to be unfolding. And every one of you is participating right now in the universe just as you need to be participating without needing to do anything at all whatsoever. It's just all happening. And if you can allow that, you can get into a flow state. There's nothing you need to do other than resist the experience. Okay? And especially when on psychedelics, you need to trust that allowance. Trust that everything is organizing with the inherent intelligence that's within all matter. It's permeating even the rocks and the trees. Everything is swimming with this intelligent motion. That is what they call the Tao. It's in everything. So there's a reliance on it. You don't have to outsmart it. It's just there. You are it. So there's a reductive quality, meaning doing less and letting the being do the rest. Okay? I'm going to read. I should probably get out of the way. Actually, that's okay. I'll just crouch because I'll be sitting back down. So I'm going to read verse 2 from the Tao Te Ching. If you haven't read the Tao Te Ching, I recommend you get yourself a copy. There's different authors. It's like a Bible. There's just a bunch of verses, and then you can just sift through them. But this is the end of verse 2. The wise teach without telling, allow without commanding, have without possessing, care without claiming. In this way, we harvest eternal importance because we never announce it. I thought it was beautiful. Okay. So there's this really cool psychologist named Arnold Mindell. He also he came up with something called process science. So the word process is actually very synonymous with the Tao. It literally means the same thing. This is a little kind of edgy, but this just gives you some perspective. This is a quote by him. He says, "If the Tao should rule," meaning what I just said about the inherent intelligent motion in everything, if the Tao should rule, then the opposite, something blocking it. I think it says, can you look what it says? Oh, yeah. Okay. Then the opposite of the Tao would be tyrant or framer who insists on determining how things should be. Okay, that's the opposite of the Tao. The opposite of the Tao then is the anti-process, a state-oriented attitude where which pre-programs behaviors and frames events before they occur. I'll read that again. The opposite of the Tao is the anti-process, a state-oriented attitude which pre-programs behaviors and frames events before they occur. Thus, the opposite of process is a predetermined standardization, a rule or goal. So the enemy is this, like, trying to frame things, trying to conceptualize things, trying to program things, trying to standardize things. That's the opposite of this flow. The flow itself is more spontaneous. And in a way, you don't even need your personality, because, you can get so stuck on a certain way of being. Oh, I tend to adjust to people, or I tend to be contrarian, or I tend to be this way. I tend to be an introvert. I tend to be an extrovert. That's because we're just taught to abide by these stereotypical behaviors that we're so used to, and we create a personality around that. But if you actually become more attentive to the spontaneous nature, every moment can be different. You're not beholden to how you were 5 minutes ago or an hour ago. Your spontaneous nature is completely unique, and it can change all the time. You don't have to maintain stereotypical behavior based on the way you're supposed to be, or you think your friends need you to be, or whatever. Make sense?
Maybe another 5, and then we could do some questions. Okay. Would be good.
So this is another big topic that actually takes up a lot of time, but I'll just kind of brush on it. And this has to do with this kind of, I'll just show this. This is like an image that I came up with. So basically, so the word Zen means union between organism and environment. That's the definition of Zen, okay? It doesn't mean meditation, although that's how people think of the word. But it literally means the union between the organism and the environment, okay? And so on the horizontal plane, you have the voluntary, which is what you can control, meaning that I'm moving my arms and I'm speaking right now, right? That's a voluntary aspect of myself. And then the involuntary is the things that I can't control, like my digestion, my blood, all the processes with my body. Those things I cannot control, but I'm still doing it. And so part of coming into like a more holistic state is to not make your body an enemy. Because we often say like, oh, my damn stomach hurts or something like that. Instead of saying, oh, I'm hurting because I am my stomach. I'm not separate from myself. And so we often taught to be in a state of adversary with our bodies. Like, oh, I'm going to fight this cold. I'm going to reduce this symptom. I'm going to fight this anxiety or depression. But in a way, we want to own the fact that I am depressing myself. I'm saddening myself. I'm angering myself. Well, any experience that you're having that you think is involuntary is just you, an aspect of you that you have created distance from. That may be hard to hear if, of course, if you feel out of control or you feel like it's just happening. But in a sense, it is still you. And then, and the same thing with the organism and the environment. Um, everybody here is inherently interdependent with your family, your friends, and it's easy to project yourself or your things onto other people and say, well, this person is such a jerk, or this person, or my wife this, or my partner is this, but it's really just an aspect of yourself that you're reflecting or mirroring. And so there's a lot to integrate with how you are embedded in your environment. And if you hurt somebody, you actually are hurting yourself. And not just on a metaphysical level, on a very fundamental organismic level, that if you're mean to somebody, you're going to have a mean face. You're not a pretty face when you're mean to somebody. So it is a direct reflection, right? That's probably all I'll say because it's too much to go into. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Dimitri. How about if we open up for a few questions from the group? See how what you're noticing as you hear these different concepts, ideas that arise for you, how you're tying it into your own psychedelic practice. And Javi will pass around this little mini mic. I have one for you, Dimitri, and something from the beginning that you mentioned. You mentioned the body scan as a practice, and I'm remembering years ago when I went to the Goenka's Vipassana, and after day 4 you get into doing the equivalent of a body scan to some extent, right? And just noticing the sankharas, the sensations throughout the body, and kind of working with that. And then years later, Javi and I did this training program which we work with cannabis, and it included doing a body scan, a progressive relaxation like that. It had a lot of similarities. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but just kind of like working and dissolving. So I'm curious about your opinion about what is the benefit of this practice. In my experience, just doing that, maybe it's just like meeting the onset with relaxation in a simple way, but maybe there's more to it of like navigating the psychedelic experience, through the body scan or something. I don't know what your thoughts are on, or if you've tried this, kind of putting those practices together.
Yeah. It's both a useful prophylactic preparation, meaning that you do it before the psychedelic experience and also during. And I would say the benefit of the body scan is not so much to relax, but to have a much more clear and accurate understanding of what's happening within you. And you don't actually necessarily need to do the whole body scan. You can also do something we call anchoring, where, like, let's say you have a heavy sensation, whether you're tripping or not, and you have it in your chest, you can put your hand there and imagine your hand as a stethoscope, like a monitoring unit or something, and you can put your hand where you feel heavy and just attend to that sensation from a place of inquisitiveness, not to get rid of it, because then you're in a state of aversion or you don't like it, but from a place of inquisitiveness and allowance, and to inquire into it to understand it better. So we don't want to use inquiry as a painkiller. We want to use inquiry as a way to understand ourselves more deeply. And maybe part of what's hurting you is not the actual feeling, but your idea about it, which goes back to the concept. Most of your pain is in concept. The sensation itself is not hurting you. It's a little heavy. But yeah, it's to understand yourself better.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. There's a question over there with a shell, and then over here.
I have a question. I'm curious. I know you mentioned at the beginning, you said almost like the Tao is synonymous with psychedelics, and I was curious. I guess one question is curious, like, for you, did you get closer and get more curious about Taoism and the Tao through psychedelics, or psychedelics a precursor? Because it's funny. It's so crazy to hear this, because I remember being in the jungle with the medicine, and then medicine's like, maestro, like, you know how to do this, right? And it was essentially was saying, because they sent me Goenka's wife, right? Pops up. It was like, oh, I work with these type of people, right? And then, because I was having a really hard time, and it was like, yeah, like, dude, do the technique, right? In the middle of nowhere. I was like, no, I'm gonna walk all the way back to Chicago. Like, get out of here. And then and essentially these things transformed into sensation versus the value of like, oh, this is a negative sensation. I need to like sort of like push away or pull forward. And then but for me it was like the beginning of that was like definitely sort of sitting in these silence, and then sort of sitting with the teachers in that way, and then seeing that reinforced. So I was curious, like in your personal experience, and also if you could speak to that historically at the advent of Taoism, if you have any information around psychedelics in use as the development of some of these philosophies.
That's a lot of questions. I will not strive to answer them. What came first, the chicken or the egg? It was the psychedelics that came first, of course. I was lucky enough to have it. But I'll give you one example where I experienced the Tao. I was at this festival. It was called Symbiosis Festival. It was one of the first ones in Yosemite. And I ate a ton of mushrooms. I don't know. I had so much. It was ridiculous. I was completely out there. And I remember I had to walk from one stage to another. And I thought, okay, I want to get to this other stage. And then all of a sudden, I start running. And all of a sudden, I started to feel this immense pain. And then all of a sudden, they tell me, nope, you're not running. You're going to, just go very slow. And then it forced me to experience the process of what happens in the midst of getting from one place to another. And it made it painful to me for me to rush. And the only way that I can experience bliss is if I honored the natural flow of getting from one point to another. And as soon as I rushed a little, I felt constriction and pain. So it literally programmed me to be graceful and to move with how it's intended to be. And so I think that's where I realized, oh, they're the same thing. They're not trying to create shortcuts. They want to experience the texture of everything in between. What happens in the midst of the experience, instead of just saying, okay, I want to go teleport from one point to another and cut out and I met really cool people along the way and experienced myself in a way that was very beautiful along the way because I didn't want to hurry up. So that's why it's synonymous. As far as your question about psychedelics and Taoism in China, I don't know. Honestly, I think that there's probably even something more fundamental than psychedelics that happened. Something in matter, some kind of wisdom that uprooted from some cosmic spirit or something. That's what I think it is. I think it's beyond plants, probably. That's just my opinion.
All right, we'll have one more question here. Yeah.
Okay, it's a mic. Hello. So I can definitely see and feel into how, if you've really incorporated into your own practice and your own being and your own belief system, all of these philosophies, that the psychedelic journey can and will be probably a more amenable one and peaceful and graceful one. And my question is more as a therapist in your psychedelic assisted work. What are some things that maybe you can share with us that you can do to help a person who has forgotten that in that moment when they're struggling? Because in my own work with psychedelics, I do struggle a lot, and I can definitely tell the difference when I've been meditating frequently all the time, every day. If I do a trip at that point, it's going to be a lot easier than when I've fallen off my practice and I just forget everything and I'm a baby again. So when you see someone who's fallen into that space of forgetting, what are things that you as a therapist can do to help?
That's a good question. It reminds me of, I was one time at Harbin and there was a woman that had too much cannabis and she was like, oh, and she stumbled upon me and I was like, oh, I'm a therapist, maybe I'll help you out. And then and then she was like, oh, I feel like I'm gonna die. And I said, just die right now. And then all of a sudden she just projectile vomited. And I think that brought a lot of relief. But To answer your question, invite them to allow whatever they're experiencing. I'm gonna die. Okay, let's be with that. I hate myself. Okay, hate yourself right now. Invite them, give them permission to allow unequivocally whatever the experience is. It doesn't matter what it is. Just allow. I want to kill myself. Oh wow, that's okay too. Anything whatsoever. So just tell them to allow. That's the easiest answer. Allow the experience. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you so much, Dimitri.
Thank
Big
you.
round of
Thanks for
applause
listening.
for Dimitri
wait.
Wolfovich.
One more? There was a question?
We can do a quick one. Yeah, go ahead. This might lead into our next talk, too. But
You don't even need psychedelics. This information is useful in everyday life. Right now, just allow yourself to be just as you are right now, and that's already using this wisdom. The way you're sitting, the way you're looking at me is completely okay, and I'm an allowance of it, and you should too. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.